Well, hello everyone. I'm Tom Murray, the Director of Innovation for Future Ready Schools, a project of All4Ed located in Washington, D.C. Future Ready Schools is a collaboration between All4Ed and a vast coalition of over 60 national and regional partner organizations. The goal of Future Ready Schools is to maximize learning opportunities for all students and to help school districts move quickly towards student-centered learning. The effort provides educators with resources and support to ensure that local strategic and technology plans aligned with instructional best practices are implemented by highly trained teachers and maximize personal and authentic learning experiences for all students, particularly those from historically underserved communities. As always, the hashtag for today's webinar is Future Ready. Thanks so much for making an investment in your time today, for joining us. And I'm going to be your host on this webinar on to unlock the power of social emotional learning in middle school, fostering student growth and well-being. And I couldn't be any more fired up to have today's amazing and brilliant guest, somebody that I've gotten to know in the past few months, and that's the one and only Melody Hawkins, a secondary administrator in Knox County Schools in Tennessee. Melody, my friend, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you take a few minutes to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. Shout out Future Ready. I am so excited to be here today. Yes, I am Melody Hawkins. I am an administrator in Knoxville, Tennessee, in Knox County Schools. And I am a forever science teacher. I will always be a science teacher at the core of me, at my heart. That is where I entered into education almost 10 years ago. And it really was a calling for me. I truly felt like it was something that was a part of my purpose and a part of who I am. So I actually made a career pivot from working in laboratory science. And I decided that I wanted to pursue my licensure to become a teacher. The very first school that I interviewed at is the very first school that I served. And that was a wonderful middle school here in Knoxville, Tennessee, Vine Middle School. Love it so much. Love the kids, love the staff, love my leadership. And it really has made me who I am today as an educator.
Well, that is awesome. And having been a middle school principal myself, I'm guessing that background in science, sometimes when you're looking at like what is on this cafeteria table, like that probably comes in handy, I'm guessing, because sometimes it's like you don't know about middle school, right? I mean, this is an interesting place. I found people either loved it or hated it. And I loved it. I mean, the chaos of it, the structured chaos, but kids are just so neat at that age. You know, they're so quirky at that age. They're learning kind of who they are. And what an opportune time as well to talk about the social emotional practices, because with those hormones raging and all the chaos that ensues and all the craziness and the drama, right, in the seventh grade hallway. I
Nonstop,
mean,
nonstop.
these practices, right? Anybody that stepped foot in a middle school as a teacher or principal knows exactly what we're talking about here, especially at that. So let's dive in, Melody. You know, we all know that SEL can't be just this handful of sporadic lessons throughout the year, and we've got to be really intentional about keeping it at the heart of the student experience. You know, a lot of times these conversations are really about the elementary level, and here we're going to also focus more at the secondary level where you are as that secondary administrator and really what it can look like. So how can educators be intentional about building this solid foundation for SEL implementation so it's not just a handful of lessons throughout the year, but it's really core to what they do? What can that look like?
Oh yeah, that's a great place to really anchor our conversation today. When I walked into the classroom, I did not walk in with the knowledge of social emotional learning. That was not something that I already came with. My first year teaching was really like my student teacher year. So that was my first opportunity in a classroom as an educator. I was on what was called a transitional license at that time. Now I think it's called like job embedded. I already had my bachelor's degree in science, in microbiology. So I was focused on teaching science. That was my thing. I wanted to come in, especially the community of students that I was serving. My school is located in an historically economically excluded community, underserved populations. So socioeconomic status is a very huge decision maker in the funding that we receive as a school. So I already knew that I was ready to come in and just pump my students with everything they needed to know to be successful in the classroom, but also as they transition into the world as young humans, right? So I was focused on teaching science. What I realized is that because of some of the barriers that my students experienced, things that were not planned for their lives, right? Like they didn't ask to be in some of the situations that they were in the community, but because of those barriers, it became a difficult accessibility point for my students to actually learn and love science, right? So what I started doing was trying to figure out, okay, so before I speak to my students on the academic level, I've got to speak to them as young people. I have got to make that connection with who they are, with what they love, what they want to do in life, what they care about right now. I have to make that connection first. So I really began my journey in social emotional learning, not with all of the research and the beautiful knowledge that exists about it. I began my journey with just trying to connect and build a relationship with my students. I really wanted them to know that I truly cared about who they are, that I wanted them to be successful, that I believed that they could be successful. And I told them that all the time. So my whole first year of teaching was all about building relationships while teaching science, of course, but also learning who they are, learning more about my school community, because I was new coming into the school. So I wanted to know as much as possible about my students' experiences in other classrooms, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, outside of school. All of those things mattered so much to me for their experience that they would have in the four walls of my room, right? So that whole first year, I was learning content ferociously. I accepted every opportunity that I could. If it came along with, this is how you become a better teacher, then Melody Hawkins was there, because I wanted to make sure that my students had the best experiences possible so that they truly could be anything that they wanted to be once they transitioned to high school and post-secondary life. After my first year of teaching, I really started diving into the research. And it really was, and this is why I say like the leadership at my school was amazing, because it really was my principal, being an instructional leader. That is who she was. And she came to me and said, "Hey, Melody, I don't know if you realize this, but the latest research is talking about including social personal competencies in the classroom and 21st century skills in the classroom. And you're doing that. And I don't know if you know you're doing it, but you're doing it and you're doing a great job." And I was like, "Well, thanks," right? Like that made me feel so enthusiastic. So I wanted to try even more. So that summer in between first and second year, sidebar, this is why I say teachers don't ever get time off, because we're always studying and learning and trying to figure out how to be better. So that summer between my first and second year, I was diving into what is this thing about social emotional learning? What are 21st century skills? What are social emotional competencies? What does it mean to be emotionally intelligent? I just took a deep dive into that. And what I decided to do when I came back to my second year of teaching is, and this is where I encourage all of my educator colleagues, all of my educator friends to begin every school year. I started this my second year, and I do this every year, but I began the school year with thinking about, first of all, what do I believe about myself as an educator? Who am I when I walk into the classroom in front of my students? Because all of the preparation that I do before I come and the lesson planning and all that stuff is very important, but it's also important that I show up as a whole healthy human being standing in front of them. And healthy can mean emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, physically healthy. I want to be a healthy person in front of them. So I always begin every year thinking about, who am I and what do I believe about me as an educator? Do I truly believe what the research says, that I am the number one impactor in my students' academic life? Do I really believe that, right? Do I really believe that of all the adults in the world, my students are fortunate to have me in front of them? Like, what do I believe about me? And then I transfer that belief about myself into, well, what do I believe about my students? And so for me, it's always beginning with a belief system about myself and then about who my students are, no matter what stereotypes exist, no matter what narratives exist about them. Who do I believe they are sitting in my classroom? And then how can I set up my environment so that it cultivates what I believe about them?
Melody, you got me fired up over here. I can listen to you go on all day long, my friend. I can tell you that. And I'm sure the people that are listening today are shaking their heads saying, like, preach it, girl, because like this is exactly the conversation that we love having at Future Ready Schools to get to the heart of it. And I took down some notes as you were talking. One thing that you just said that really struck me was on, how it was your principal that pushed and showed and helped you understand. And that just shows that leadership matters. And now that's you in your role, like leading the way there and helping teachers understand in the world they have. But this isn't just something we just abdicate and hope gets finished in the classroom, hope gets completed in the classroom. This is something that leadership absolutely matters. And it was core to the story that you just told. The other thing, as you were talking, it really reminded me of just the late Rita Pearson and how every child deserves that champion. And as you were speaking and talking about the relationships and just going to bat for your kids, I mean, that just reminded me of that incredible TED Talk, which I'm sure if not all of our viewers have heard, most of us heard. And if you haven't heard of it, you got to go watch that TED Talk
Yes,
if you're
go
listening.
watch.
Right. How about it? What incredible, incredible teacher she was. And then finally, it's kind of that old adage you made me think of like students really don't know what you care what you know until they know that you care, right? Like we've all heard that, but how true is that when they know that they're loved, that they know that they're cared for, that they know that they're in a safe place, the relational components. It doesn't mean we're not going to have issues. Doesn't mean a kid's not going to act up. And sometimes they do because they feel safe with that adult there. But the foundation, as you just said, is the relationships, the people side of it, and creating those cultures. So I want to dive into the culture conversation because in having connected prior to this webinar, I know how much value you place on the classroom culture for teachers and the importance of that, and even building the culture systemically as a principal or as a district leader, whatever role you might be in. And so my question really is, here we are heading back to school. Some of us have already started. They're already the first few weeks in, and culture is always a part of that conversation early in the year. It's an important part, but it's got to be something that's important all year long, not just here in these first few weeks of school. So how can administrators and teachers foster a nurturing classroom and school environment? And as we kick off this new year, how can educators really be intentional about it?
Yeah. For from what I have always seen, we really have to make sure that our students are central to the work. They have to be actively a part of the work. So if the work is we want to create a positive classroom culture, then I need to include my students' voice in that work. So for me, what that has always looked like is involving my students in setting our classroom community agreement. I used to call them classroom expectations. Now I call it a community agreement because I want my students to know that you are a part of a community. When you walk into the classroom, you are a part of a vast community. We are all connected to each other. We all have commonalities, even though when we scan the room, we may have some differences. That's beautiful, but we also have a lot of things in common with each other. So, including the students in those conversations and allowing their voice to be heard is absolutely essential. It's not going to work unless they are a part of it. And then scaling that on the school level, the students have to be a part of the work when it comes to setting the school environment, the school culture, the school climate. I love the fact that I have noticed lots of schools really including student voice in determining what their school like core values and pillars are going to be. I really love that a lot of schools are taking that on and are including student voice in that, creating little student advisory councils and student committees that can really foster that approach to really thinking about, okay, well, what is it that we want our students to feel and see and do when they walk into the doors of our school and walk into our classrooms. So and then also taking that and using that as a foundation for the whole being of everything that you do. There were times in my classroom where say months down the road, we have our community agreement. It's posted on the wall. The students know it. We all agreed to it. We came together in a collaborative process that I facilitated to help them gather thoughts about what the community agreement might be. And then one day, everything's chaotic. Like everyone has forgotten what the community agreement is, and things are a little out of whack. But I can take that moment and I can leverage the fact that it was their voice, that it was their ideas that came up with how we are supposed to be in a classroom so that we can contribute to the growth academically and socially of everyone in the room. So I always refer to our agreement. Whenever things were a little bit crazy, because in middle school, it happens. Believe it or not, it happens quite often. So even if things were a little bit crazy, I would always say, okay, y'all, let's go back. Let's go back. We came up with a community agreement way back in August. And I need someone to remind me, what does that agreement say? And there, you can't forget it because it's everywhere in the room. It's everywhere around us, right? What does that community agreement say? And so I might have a student make some mention of different things about respecting everyone's voice, what respect looks like, about allowing open opinions, and not being rude or mean to people if they have an opinion that they want to share, as long as it's not hurtful to the room. And so, I have students that are reminding us of this, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, guys, look, you created this agreement. I was just a willing participant. I was here for it. I saw it. I watched you, but you all said that these are the things that you value about being in a classroom, and this is the environment you need to be in order to be successful. Are we doing that right now? Are we doing that? And in my asking them about their opinion about how we are in the room at that moment and some of our less than great moments, right? What that was doing was sparking the self-management piece of them. That was sparking the social awareness piece of them. That was sparking the responsible decision maker in them, for them to stop and realize, okay, wait a minute, I am a part of this community. Is what I'm doing right now adding value to or harming the community that I am in, which is my classroom? And the only reason that I was able to appeal to them in that way is because we started with a central common idea about how do we want learning to feel when we are in this room? What do we need in order to be successful? But even before that, before I walked them on the journey of what it looks like to have a community agreement and be successful in this room, I had to be honest with them and share with them my beliefs about them and my vision for them while they're in my classroom. So my students were very clear about what I believed in them and how much I cared about them and the vision that I had for them. And that's how I was able to keep things going throughout the year. They knew Miss Hawkins loved them. They still do. They know Miss Hawkins loves them. And they know that I believe that they can do anything if they're in an environment that is conducive for that. So we have to make sure that the environment and the climate and the culture is appropriate for them so they can do and achieve anything.
Ooh, brilliantly said, my friend. Brilliantly said. I love that. And not only do you serve as an administrator in your role for your great district, but you also do some consulting and speaking around these areas as well. So I know one of the areas that you dive into is really in developing a growth mindset for impactful learning. And I think you've modeled your journey and how you've had that growth mindset to get to the point where you are today. You didn't walk out of your program and here you are, right? You've had that growth mindset even as an administrator to get to that point to where you are today. So now as you're speaking, as you're consulting, as you're supporting people in this kind of work, how can you tell us more about how folks can develop that growth mindset for impactful learning? How's that growth happen?
Oh, I believe wholeheartedly that it starts with a vision. It starts with a vision for your students and for yourself as an adult in those kids' lives, right? I am one who I try to stay optimistic, right? But there's always something happening that kind of that challenges my optimism. Let's just put it like that. It challenges my optimism. It challenges the joy that I try to always maintain within me. And in those challenging moments, I go back to my vision. What is my vision for my students? My vision has and it always will be that I am a part of a community that is cultivating young people into being whole, healthy, social, emotionally intelligent, and academically like brilliant people in this world, and that they're going to change the lives of so many. They will be the ones to change lives. They're going to change lives, right? That is my vision for them. My vision is that my students will be healthy members of their community and that they will change the lives of their community, not just their community, but also their families, right? So it begins with a vision. And I always talk about that whenever I'm sharing that with my colleagues. My husband hears it all the time. What is our vision for our girls? Because I have two little girls, Madison and Maya. They're 11 and 8. 11-year-old heading to sixth grade, heading to middle school. So here we go, right? And my 8-year-old is third grade, and I'm always talking about that even with them. And that's the thing that that I try to remind my colleagues as well, is that when our families are sending their kids to school, they are sending the best that they have in the house, right? They're not keeping the other one at home. Like they're sending the best that they have. Our families believe that their kids are the best. So we should absolutely believe that too. And so if we have to start over every day and say to ourselves, okay, what is my vision about my students and what is my vision about who I am in their life? Then we need to do that if that's what it takes every single day. So a big part of my consulting work is beginning with the vision, whatever it is. And sometimes that might be, okay, well, let's start with the organizational vision. What is the vision of your organization? Why does your organization exist? So whether I'm talking to schools or student-centered community organizations, what is the vision of who you are in your community for your kids that you serve, right? And then from that vision, let's start unpacking it. Let's start breaking apart that vision. And what I have realized every time I work with someone, every time I work with them, the vision always includes social, emotional, and academic development. It always has that in there. There's always little pieces of that in there. From where I've seen visions that might say that we're helping our students to thrive in a changing world. Thriving requires social, emotional, and academic development and strategies for doing that, right? Or I might see a vision that's, well, we want our students to be positive contributors to their community. Being a positive contributor in your community means that you have to have social, emotional, academic development at the core of your organization, right? When you're talking about students. So every time I see a vision, I get fired up because I'm thinking, yes, this is where the work begins. It's not just words on a paper. It's not just something that we came together to think of to say that we did it, right? This is where the work begins. And where I love working with organizations is taking that vision and unpacking it and then looking at, okay, well, what are some strategies that we can use and employ to make sure that we are meeting our vision every day? That there is never a moment that our kids are interacting with the adults in our organization, in our school, in our community, and they do not feel the vision that we have laid out before them. And I love that. I love looking at that. It's where I go every day. So anytime I'm talking to someone, I'm telling you, this is something I do every day. My vision for what I see for my students in the community that I serve is what gets me up in the morning and makes me go to that PD that I would rather be in the bed sleep, maybe, but I know that my vision is connected to that professional learning opportunity. I know that the vision I have for my students is connected to the phone call that I have to make to speak to a parent. The vision I have for my students is connected to a conversation that I need to have with my colleague, to a collaboration that I need to do. My vision for my students is connected to every single thing that I do. And so I have to be intentional. It kind of goes back to what you mentioned earlier about being intentional. My vision is what allows me to be intentional.
Love that. And I love that mic drop moment there as well. Your vision is what allows you to be intentional. And I think you're speaking to, again, to think, just reflecting on your words there, the importance of leadership and setting that vision for what do we want this to look like in our building. So this isn't just every teacher kind of off on their own doing what they think, maybe could be best. It's what's that vision? What is this going to look like for our building? What do we believe? I love how you mentioned your core, right? And what that looks like there as well. The other thing I was really reflecting on as you were saying it is, let's be real. Not every day is this amazing, awe-inspiring, fun experience where we're smiling. Everything is just hunky dory and everything's great. We do have those challenging days. And I love how you reflected on that. I'm a big believer in we have to choose our lens. Like if we got up this morning and we want to see negativity in our world, we're going to see it all over the place. We got up this morning, you want to see greatness in our world. First of all, walk down a school hallway, but we're going to see it all over the place. And I believe we've got to be intentional in choosing our lens each day. I love those words that you just shared. Truly brilliant and just helping to get this work in action to happen. So I do want to remind everyone that the hashtag for today's event, as always, is Future Ready. So Melody, I know you also value the importance of incorporating SEL into ongoing professional learning experiences. You just mentioned PD a little bit a few moments ago. And so I know you really pairing up the value of SEL into ongoing professional learning experiences. So how can school and district leaders really best lead that?
Oh, that's great. So again, starting with the vision, it has to be incorporated in the vision, right? Like if you want to have social emotional academic development, social emotional learning a part of your school culture, then it has to be in the vision. But then once you've done that work and you've ensured that it's part of who you see your kids, your students, as their future selves, you see that work in who they're going to be. Then it really takes turning to some resources and getting involved in the latest research about what social emotional learning and what social emotional academic development looks like. There are some amazing resources that I have used over the years. And really, even before I started looking for those resources, though, I really wanted to see, okay, well, what do I already do in my classroom that speaks to where I want my students to be, right? Because I am a firm believer that and every educator in the room is in there and is already doing something. I believe it. You're already doing something that speaks to the holistic child or holistic student that you are pumping into, right? So I believe that it's important to start there. There are some things that we're already doing as a community, as an educator community, in making sure that our students are becoming those individuals that we know that they can become. And really those things that we're already doing, it's because we know that it's important that they have these experiences where they get to collaborate with each other, where they're using their communication skills, where they're, stop and think first before you respond. We know that all of those things are important for who they are academically. So the academic part is already there. The social emotional part is already there. I always encourage my colleagues to use resources to just tighten it and make it great and fortify it and make it strong and make it so that it again is intentional in serving the needs that you see. I have in my classroom something as simple as an agenda, having an agenda posted every day. That consistency, my students see the agenda every day and they know what is coming. We're going to do this first and then this and then this, and we're going to spend this amount of time on it, and these are the materials that you need. That is allowing them to have some responsibility in their educational progress. They have responsibility in their academic experience in that moment. So when I'm presenting the agenda, then I can say, okay, well, do you have the materials that you need to do the next activity that we're going to do? And they can then think for themselves and say, well, I need a pencil and I don't have one, so now I need to go get one, right? They have the opportunity to become responsible decision makers. And on a school level, it works the same way. If I have clearly communicated our agreement for how our school is going to thrive and how we're going to work and how we're going to be, then that means that I'm putting the onus into my students' hands to make sure that they are able to make responsible decisions about that. And some of my favorite resources to go to for ideas about how to do that, I love inspirescl.org. It is an amazing professional resource hub. It's designed for educators. It's on demand, free on demand modules. You can access them at any point from anywhere. And did I say they were free? They are free, like for real free, not like you log
Everybody,
in.
everybody likes the freemium, right?
Yeah,
Everybody likes.
right. Yeah, like you log in and it's not going to say, "Oh, to get this you got to sign up." Like no, like you create your account and it's all there and it's beautiful. And there's even things for coaches and mentors. So it literally is something for every single adult that impacts a student in our community, right? I also love Harmony SEL. It has content that it's made specific for teachers and educators to be able to administer with their students to create that environment, that whole healthy, beautiful learning environment. And then I love Castle, another one of the leading resources for research when it comes to social emotional learning. All of these, and I could go on and on. Those are some of my favorites. But there's research, and there's resources out there. So it's nothing that an educator feels like they have to go at alone. It's not something you have to do alone. There's access to a lot of content out there. And what I do with my organization, with my consulting, is supporting organizations with identifying, well, what are the pieces, what are the pieces of research and the pieces of materials that you want to have core and central to the work that you're doing with your students.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing some of those resources, because a lot of times educators will say, like, not for this webinar, but like, wow, this sounds all good, but like, where do I go? What do I do? And, I'm going to add a couple there. First, I completely agree with Harmony and Inspire programs through National University, truly the best that's out there. And we are proud to partner with them and work with them. They're incredible stuff. And as you just mentioned, It's free. Like there's no sales pitch here. It's free, right? And a lot of times educators, having been on the other side of this, are thinking like, well, what's the catch? Like, what's the catch? Is it really free? But hey, when people believe in great work and the grant fund things and they say, hey, this is such a need, people are willing to pay to support things that schools are doing. And so definitely check out the Harmony Inspire programs through National University. The other thing that I'll add is Future Ready also is partnered with the Achievery. And if you go to futureready.link/achievery, there's a lot of great SEL content in there as well. I encourage you to check that out. And then third, Melody was talking earlier about the student center aspects of this. And we launched a few months back the Future Ready Learner Profile, where communities come together to really look at what is it that we value. And it's this human-centered design thinking approach to say, like, what is a community that we value? And then how do the experiences match that? And overall, the SEL components to that and connections to that overlap beautifully. And so I encourage you to check those out as well. But first, start with the Harmony Inspire programs through National University. What incredible, incredible resources. So in closing, let me ask you this. No matter where a school or a district leader is on, let's call it this implementation continuum, right? What advice do you have for them, no matter where they are with implementing SEL practices each and every day?
Hmm. Um, wow. I would have to say, um, it is okay to need to start over. It's okay to need to pause and regroup. Um, it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to wonder if it's really working, and that's why it's so important that in the implementation you build out your goals. You decide, well, who are going to be our early implementers, who will hold us accountable for the work, like who's going to make sure that we're actively doing this. How are we going to measure that what we're doing is working, or how are we going to keep those metrics going? All of those very important strategic systematic approaches to it. It's very important because the human part of you is going to get frustrated sometimes. The human part of you is going to say, okay, well, we have this program, we've got 5 classrooms that are doing it, and our teachers are going to the PLs, and we're doing this stuff, and we're sending surveys home, and the survey results are coming back. The parents say, yeah, we love it. The teachers are like, yeah, we love it. But sometimes it just feels like everything we're trying it's just not working. It's just not working. It's okay to feel like that. It's not okay to just stop. It's never okay to just give up. And I say that with very much so firsthand knowledge of what it feels like to wonder, is what I'm doing even working? My community has experienced, my education community, my students, we've experienced a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. Our kids are exposed to things that really just breaks my heart every day. And it's violent. There has been gun violence in my community that have led to death of several of my students. I have lost students to tragedy that I, as an adult, do not understand. And I know that my students that are still with us don't understand it, and they're hurt. And so in those moments, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm doing everything I can in my classroom. I am implementing these wonderful things for my students, and I know that it's not fixing everything. It's not solving every problem that they face. It's not, right? But I never give up. I've never stopped. And the next day, after something has happened, I show up at school, and my students come to me and they give me hugs, and we sit and talk, and we get angry together, we laugh together, we cry together, and then we keep walking together. They need to absolutely see that there are people who love them and care about them no matter what is going on, and that we are not giving up. So you have to stay relentless in your pursuit of creating an environment and a culture where your students are growing and thriving socially, emotionally, and academically. And you can't do that by giving up. You can't do that by giving up. Because what if your school is the one place where your students always feel safe? What if your classroom is the one place where your students love to be because they always know what's coming next? They don't ever have to wonder what's coming next. They don't have to wonder if this adult is going to love on them and accept them on their good and bad days. They can come to your classroom and they know, okay, Dr. Murray's not going to let me just act any kind of way because he's going to call my home and he's going to let them know that, well, today was not the best day, but we're going to try again tomorrow. So Dr. Murray cares about me. It's about being relentless. It's about being relentless. And that's why I preach so much about the vision, because in those moments where I am grieving the loss of a student, in those moments where I am consoling a student whose friend is no longer with us, I go back to my vision and I communicate that to my students in that moment. And I tell them, I believe that you all are going to change this community. You are going to change the entire world. So that's why I am going to keep pumping you with the social, emotional skills and strengths that you need so that you can be one of the positive impactors in this environment because we so need it. I tell them that, I believe it, and I'm relentless about it. And I encourage every educator to be that same way.
Mm. Melody, I'm in awe. Two of my takeaways of the things that you just said that I love so much is never, ever give up. Never give up on a child. One of the things I think about as we kick off a new year and just being totally real, you ever have that experience? And you don't have to answer this. I'm processing for myself here. You ever have that experience on that first day of school where you're thinking to yourself, you don't verbalize it, but you're thinking to yourself like 180 days with this one right here, right?
It's real. Yeah.
Why is it that on that last day of school, that one right there is often the hardest to say goodbye to? Or the one with the tears in their eyes because they don't want to go on summer break because of the safe space that you just talked about. Why? Wow. The other piece, just being relentless in the pursuit. That doesn't mean like, I guess maybe when I'll get to it, of like, this is a core essential to what we do, and I'm not going to stop until it happens. Wow, Melody, your words are inspiring. They are encouraging. I'm so glad you are out there speaking and consulting and supporting, and most importantly, leading a school building and the work that you're doing. Wow, what incredible, incredible words. So I wanted to leave it at those mic drop moments, but I'm guessing some folks want to know, how do I connect with Melody? How do I reach out? So thank you so much for your incredible insights, your amazing words of wisdom today. But if our viewers want to connect with you and they want to reach out, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. The quickest way to get in touch with me or to connect with me is through my social accounts, my social media accounts. I am at mhawkinsedu on both Instagram and Twitter. I also have a website, melodyhawkins.org. You can connect with me through my website, which also helps you connect with me through social media. I'm always loving to connect with other like-minded individuals, but I love just spending time with educators and supporting and talking about how we can really create a climate and an environment where our students can truly be successful. I'm all about visionary leadership in education. So anytime you catch me on Twitter or Instagram or even on LinkedIn, I'm also on LinkedIn, you catch me there, I'm always talking about visionary leadership in education because I believe that is what it takes. We have to be visionaries and we have to do the work.
So good. Melody, the highest compliment that I can give, and this is on a personal note, not a future ready note. Listen, I would put you in charge of my babies. I could in a heartbeat. And that is the highest compliment that I can give another school or district leader. Thank you for your work. Thank you for loving on those kids, those middle schoolers at such an incredible, incredible age. We appreciate you. We recognize your leadership. So thank you so much. So that is all the time that we have for today. Viewers, we are sorry to have to cut that off because, like me, I'm sure you could listen to her all day long to continue to learn from the brilliance. And we do want to thank Melody for sharing her great insights with us all today. We also want to give a shout out to our partners that were mentioned earlier, Harmony Inspire Programs at National University, for their support and for supporting today's webinar. I do want to remind our viewers that information about Future Ready Schools can be found at futureready.org. We continue to challenge school district superintendents to join the 3,500 others that have signed on to the Future Ready Pledge. I also want to encourage our viewers, to get involved with one of our growing strands. From district leaders to technology leaders, principals, librarians, instructional coaches, we've vastly expanded the reach of Future Ready Schools in recent years. Check out our private Facebook groups, ongoing activities to stay connected with those working alongside of you throughout the nation as well. So I again want to thank Melody, as well as thank you, our viewers, for joining us for this Future Ready webinar. Don't forget to connect with us here at Future Ready on Twitter at Future Ready and on Facebook at facebook.com/Future Ready Schools. If you did miss any of today's conversation, it'll be archived at futureready.org/webinars. Thanks again for joining us here at Future Ready Schools. Have a fabulous day. We'll see you next time.